Are you a busy parent? Do you feel like you're being pulled in multiple directions all at once? Are you exhausted and overwhelmed? Meet my mom. Her name is Santi Tenikela. She's a pediatrician, expert in mind-body medicine, and a life coach. She can help you break free from guilt and overwhelm so that you can enjoy the life that you've worked so hard to create. She can also teach you how to support your family in a more holistic way.
Hello and welcome to the I Am Well MD podcast. Today I have Dr. Vanessa Calderón on the podcast with us. Dr. Calderón is an MD and MPP. She's a Harvard graduate, board certified physician, and master coach who specializes in coaching executives, leaders, and entrepreneurs to master their mind, maximize their impact, and improve both their professional results and their team's performance. She brings her scientific knowledge in neuroscience, psychology, habit building, and her 20 years of leadership and business development experience to help her clients create quick and innovative solutions in an evolving marketplace. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Calderon.
Thank you so much, Dr. T.
It's great to have you here. I can't wait to hash into all this information, all this wisdom that you carry about leadership and especially women in leadership. I think so many times we see women in leadership and we feel like they're unicorns, that we could never aspire to be like them. I want to kind of break the mold of what we originally thought was possible, and I'm excited to do that with you.
Yeah, let's jump in.
So first, tell me a little bit about your path. What ultimately inspired you to become who you are today?
The cosmos. Astrology inspired me. No, I'm just kidding. It's funny. The more and more I grow and learn, the more I realize that for me, when I let it be easy and I just release all the who I have to be and what am I becoming, it all flows naturally. And I probably would have been here anyway, maybe with a lot less suffering had I just let it happen. But, I'm a daughter of immigrants. I was born from very humble beginnings. My parents immigrated from Latin America. Neither of them have college degrees by any means. I'm the first doctor in the family, first generation American. And I am a healer by birth. I am a physician by training, but a healer by birth. I come from a long ancestral line of healers, and I have been so blessed to be able to reconnect with that ancestral part of me and work with curanderos and shamans. And, I say that because healing has always been core to who I am. And so even though I also have what I have now come to learn as natural leadership tendencies, where I want to be a servant leader and I like to find consensus and I like to bring people together and I like to be directive and I have sort of those leadership qualities, I am also a healer. And so for me, the path that I was on and where I find myself now, when I reflect back, I'm like, okay, so this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And, you mentioned I have 20 years of leadership experience, and that ranges from department chair, med exec, national board experience, and then a lot of founding experience, founded different organizations and businesses. And I just am so grateful of the experiences that brought me here. What inspired me really is to be in service. I come from, again, a background of service. My mom was an angel when she was on earth. She passed away a year ago, but she was an earth angel, and she was 100% all about compassion and service, compassion and service. That was, and she died. When she died, she was the city mayor of a town and she was still in that seat. And she was all about public service. She didn't graduate college, but she was all about service. And my dad, the work ethic of an immigrant, just like so hardworking and so caring, but all about always doing the right thing. So like working so hard, but always in integrity. And so when I think about sort of my story and what I was here to create, I think about my mom's compassion and service, my dad's work ethic and integrity. And there you have me, like someone fully committed to being in truth, authenticity, but always being in service.
That is so beautiful. I feel like we see a lot of leaders who aren't always in service of themselves and the community in a integrative sort of way, in a way that everyone rises up. And so it brightens my heart to hear you put it in this way, that this marriage of ideas created the marriage of those ideas in you, and you are now bringing that into the world in a very meaningful way. So, in your experience of leadership, what are some of the difficulties that you have seen in trying to have that level of integrity, have that level of compassion?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, before I answer that, let me just take a step back and name some of the most effective leadership qualities, some of the most by far effective leadership qualities. And these are things that have been studied by big business schools. The most transformative leadership qualities are qualities like authenticity, are qualities like human-centered leadership, which actually just means compassion, like having compassion, vulnerability. So these are what we call transformative leadership qualities. And as I continue to say these, what does it sound like? Compassion, vulnerability, authenticity. These are just like feminine qualities. And we all have masculine and feminine in us, right? We all have both of those, the yin and the yang. And so we can all embody these types of things. But why do these qualities matter? They matter because when you step into authenticity, vulnerability, compassion, what you end up creating is trust. The people that you are leading trust you. They will follow your lead when they trust you. They will trust you when they feel like they are actually cared about. So whenever you can show up in this way, it's not just about being authentic and vulnerable. It's also about caring about the people that you are leading, caring about them as a human, not just as a cog in a wheel. And the more and more I coach everybody, and especially women, and I support women in leaning into themselves and trusting themselves, the more I see these like phenomenal leaders that are showing up because women inherently have a lot of these qualities already. And when we can heal the things that are getting in the way of us thinking that it's not safe to show up this way, when we can heal those wounds, because it takes a lot of healing, because the world has told us that it's not okay, that we can't be too emotional. You know, we hear that a lot as women. The more we heal that, the more we have these powerful men and women standing in their true, authentic voice and leading from a place of heart. And that is so beautiful because that is integrity. When you are in integrity with who you are, you lead from a place of integrity and everybody rises. So there's been beautiful generational shifts. I've been in leadership positions for a very, very long time. And there have been old guards of leaders that have retired, and we've seen new guards stepping in, and people are still leading from wounded places. And so, you know, I guess that's job security for me, because that's what I do. I help people heal leadership wounds, but people are still leading from wounded places because of what we have just seen historically. So if you are sort of in your like 30s, 40s, 50s, you are probably coming from still some societal programming telling you certain things that are okay and are not okay. When you think about wealth or generating profit, that might still create some like, you know, discomfort inside of your body, depending on how you were raised. And those are the things we get to heal, because it is very true that there was a time where people generated wealth by extracting as much as they could from humans and from the land. And that is true. That was a model, but that doesn't have to be the model anymore. And so the more we can lean into being okay with coming from a place of integrity and knowing that generating wealth from a place that's restorative, that's in right relationship with wealth and with money, that is how everybody rises. Everybody, not just me. Everybody I hire now, I think about how can I hire them, not to extract as much as I can or not to pay them the least amount I can, but how can I hire them and build them up? How can this be a stepping stone for them? I've had a boss like that. And so when you have a boss like that, of course you want to be in partnership with them, you know, because then it's reciprocal. There's reciprocity. And that is the language of the universe, reciprocity.
That is put beautifully. And I love that because some of us are employees still, some of us are bosses and leaders, and some of us are both, right? Like if you think of parents, right? We are technically leaders for our own families. And it is powerful to step into that role and model good leadership to our kids and their kids. I love the way you have phrased this, being able to lead with integrity, being able to lead with compassion, that there's nothing parallel to this. I feel like many of us who dream of leadership tend to get in our own way. And I think some of that too might be part of that old modeling, that old behavior that we used to see. Have you, in your coaching experience, have you seen a lot of that crop up? What does that
Oh,
look like?
yes, girlfriend, yes. Oh man, I'm I'm thinking about one of my clients right now. She's so brilliant and she's been tapped for like different department chair positions and she kept thinking she wasn't ready. And then she finally was like, I think I'm ready, but I'm really afraid. And you know what was coming up for her is I'm not like those people. And I'm like, who are those people? What are those people that you're naming, you know? And we all have this archetype of what a leader is supposed to look like or be like or stand like or talk like. And if you don't have those qualities, which tend to be very like more masculine qualities, sometimes very authoritative, sometimes very dictatorial, if you don't have those qualities, you might think that leadership isn't for you. And it's so fascinating because once we were able to untangle that, it was so interesting for her to see, like, so I am a leader, but I lead in this way, or this is what I do, or this is how I show up, or this is how I speak my truth. And it was really powerful because now she's a department chair and she's killing it, you know? And she had to figure out her own authentic leadership style because one of the most important things for all of us who are interested in leadership is to know, what does leadership actually mean? What does it mean? There's many different ways. You know, there's been like a quadrillion books written about leadership. There's so much literature about leadership, so much coming from the military and from so many other ways. Like, so much written about leadership. And all I have to say is leadership is not one way. It can be so many different ways. And it's about you showing up in integrity and doing the right thing. That's what I think leadership is. So sometimes you lead quietly, sometimes you lead loudly, sometimes you lead from the back, from the front, from the middle. It's about you showing up in integrity and doing the right thing. That's the leader. My kids know that because we talk about leadership and integrity a lot at my house. And my kids are 8 and 10. It's funny. And as soon as they could talk, they knew the words patriarchy, they knew the words integrity, the words leadership.
That is great. Yes, it's the same in our household. We have a 10 and a 5-year-old, and we have had these conversations. And, my son was old enough to watch the inauguration where the first female vice president was put into office. And my daughter was just she was so little. So it was really cool. He probably didn't understand half of what I was saying, but I was like, I just need you to know that this is a moment in history. This is a moment in history. It took a long time for us to get here, but here we are. And one day you may run for office or your sister may run for office, but I just want you to know that intellectually, physically, you guys have gifts. Like these are gifts. How do we hone those gifts and use those gifts and put them out into the world in right relationship? Right.
Yes.
So even now, like my son and daughter both do taekwondo, and my daughter just started a few weeks ago, and it took some coaxing because I think to her, she felt like it was a boys' activity, that there wasn't a place for her. There's not as many girls in the class. And also, Big Brother's so good at it. I will never be like him, right? She didn't always verbalize it, but like, it's like how they hide behind you, like, no, this is not for me.
Mm.
No, this is not for me. And so he brought her in as a buddy, and she just loved it. It was a very easy class where they were just like learning how to throw punches. And now he goes into her class and will teach the littles, which is so sweet, right? Like I've been encouraging this for years. This is how we learn leadership. And we teach with love, we teach with care, we look at them eye to eye, like notice what level they're at, meet them where they are. And he's able to do all these things. And I'm just in love with the process of watching this unfold, even just within our own family.
Yeah,
Because
that's
that
really
teaches me too as a mom. I'm like, what does right leadership look like for me? It's the same thing. Being able to see eye to eye with my peers, being able to voice good ideas and learn how to implement them and teach others how to implement, right? I think in breaking some of these molds that we are so used to in the past, there's power, but there's fear. There's
oh,
fear. And
there's so much fear.
yeah, and to comment too, like I remember in high school saying to my guidance counselor, like I was surrounded by peers, including female peers, who were very assertive or who could project their voice better. And I remember feeling like I'm not like them. And I don't remember anything else from the conversation with the guidance counselor back then, but she was like, don't sell yourself short, essentially. You may be the quiet type of leader. And I carry, yeah, right? I carried that with me all these years. It's been like, I don't know how many years since high school, but yeah, like I carried that. I was like, maybe I am the quiet type of leader. Maybe there is a place for someone like me who leads gently, or leads quietly, but still leads.
Ah, 1,000,000%. Anyone who has the courage to be in integrity and do the right thing is a leader because that takes courage. The easiest thing to do is to follow behind what everyone else is doing. That's the easiest thing to do. If you are a leader, you're doing it with integrity and you have the courage to stand up and do the right thing. I think about my younger sister. She is the bomb. And she has me as an older sister. And then above us, we have one more sister. So there's three of us. And my older sister and myself, we're pretty extroverted. We're very loud. So is she. But then when you were raised with these dynamics, she was like sort of the quiet one in the family.
Mm.
And she never considered herself a leader. And I think it's very different now when I go back because I'm like, girlfriend, she's authentic and she's vulnerable and she's compassionate and she always speaks her truth and she always does the right thing and she has so much courage. I'm like, all right, like you are like the quintessential leader. She's in nursing school. She got asked to speak at their graduation to be one of the valedictorians because she was top in her class. And she was like, oh, I don't have anything. I feel so uncomfortable. I don't like all this attention on me. I'm like, that's why you're such an amazing leader because it's never about you. You never make it about you. And it takes so many leaders. It takes them so many years of service, of like growing and growing to release that ego. Certain leaders that are leading to lead. If you're leading to be in service, it's so different than if you're leading for a title or if you're leading to excel, or if you're leading for ambition. Not that any of those things are wrong, but it's just about being in balance. It's okay if you're incredibly ambitious, but also check your purpose. What is the purpose? If it's just about you, that's fine, but that's going to be short lived and it's going to probably make you unfulfilled in the long term. And so you really have to, like, when you can make it about something so much larger than you and it's not about you anymore, oof, that is where magic happens.
That is powerful. In my mind, you've hit the nail right on the head. And I think that that's something that I've identified for myself is, there's a job market out there. Which are the roles that I actually am interested in taking, not for the title, not for the prestige, but for what gifts I can bring into the world from a place of want, from a place of joy, and that might
Yes.
look very different from the other ones. It may
And you know
not
what?
bring that loud prestige that we're so used to the whole community looking for, if you will, the medical director role where maybe you don't feel like your gifts and talents will come out into the world in the way you want. There's a difference between being afraid of stepping into a medical director role because you don't think you're enough versus not wanting to go there because it doesn't meet your sense of purpose.
Ooh, yes. It takes a very mature mind to make that difference. And I'll tell you, here's what's going to happen to your mind. So, what will happen to your brain and body when you start doing what you're doing, Santi, what you mentioned, like looking for looking whatever your next step is in a way that's going to be able to like maximize your gifts. What will start happening is you are starting to release serotonin instead of dopamine. So, whenever we are excelling or looking for whatever's next. And we base our goals on these titles or achievement or even like a financial number. We're releasing dopamine in our minds when we achieve that goal. Dopamine is short lived in the brain and body, which is why we never feel satisfied, which is why we're like, well, what's next? What's next? What's next? But when we can base our goals on something longer lasting, who can I serve? How can I utilize my gifts the most? Who can I help today? What impact can I make? What you end up doing is you're releasing serotonin, and serotonin is longer lasting. And so if you're listening and you're not a doctor, let me tell you, serotonin is what we use for most of our antidepressants because it lasts the longest in the brain and the body. And you're releasing serotonin. So you start feeling more fulfilled, happier, you create more joy. We've done a lot of research to show that at the end of your life, who's more fulfilled? It's leaders that focus on these types of goals versus those that were just looking at like my next title, my next step, the next income goal, because that creates burnout. That's just chasing, chasing, chasing. And that's how you get burnt out.
I've experienced the burnout. I know a lot of our colleagues have experienced burnout for various reasons. right, moral injury, feeling like they're not able to scale back on their work, or the feeling of how do I see 20 patients each for 20 minutes and get the work done in a meaningful way, right? Where are we leading from?
Mhm.
Where are we leading from? We're leading from a place where someone else is dictating to us, these are the metrics that you have to reach in order for us to view your work as meaningful.
Yeah.
And it feels like you're a cog in a wheel. So, at the same token, when I'm seeing patients, they know, most of them know, that I like to take my time. I like to take my time. And sometimes that means that the next person waits a little bit. But I derive the most meaning from my work, my clinical work, by having these bigger conversations. Like, yeah, you've come in with abdominal pain. Okay, well, we've run the labs, we've done the imaging, everything looks okay. What else is going on? Talk to me about your stress. Talk to me about school, right? Like a lot of the people I'm seeing are kids. What's happening at home? Because a lot of people hold stress in their bellies
Hmm.
or their shoulders or their heads, right? They come in with headaches.
Hmm.
The MRI
Hmm.
comes back normal. Well, goodbye. Like, no, I can't do that. I can't do that.
Yeah.
And so it's being able to dive in and not just meet the family, meet that child where they are, get their needs taken care of, but giving them the resources to be able to help themselves down the road. Like, as a physician leader, and I don't have to be in a high level position, this is just me being a primary care physician, right? That's still leadership. To me, that's still leadership. I'm able to give these families resources to go home with that they can use again in the future when something similar arises.
Santi, that's 100% leadership. That's you being in integrity with your truth, doing the right thing for your patients, and what you know in your mind and body is the right thing to do. That is 100% leadership.
Thank you. I encourage other people too. I'm like, sometimes it does take a little bit more time. And then we have to toe the balance of how much time can I actually take with a family without hurting myself in the process, without making the day drag hours beyond what it's supposed to, without compromising my ability to go home and engage with my family from a
Mhm.
place where I have some bandwidth.
Yeah,
So,
100%. And notes and charting and everything. So, I'm an ER doc by training. Before we hit record, we were talking a little bit about this, but the more and more I started learning about how integrated everything is, your energy, your spirituality, your body, your everything. Every time I would get patients that came in with abdominal pain, chest pain, and we didn't have a diagnosis, chronic back pain, low back pain, anxiety, these headaches, the more I realized this is so much more than I'm going to be able to offer you, because I can give you a quadrillion-dollar workup, an MRI, a CAT scan. Oh, I could do echoes. We could do everything in the ER. Well, not everything, but a lot. And if I still don't have a diagnosis, it doesn't mean that everything is okay. And I think really, and there were so many patients that even just Santi, just for those listening, even just bringing up the fact, like validating them and saying something is wrong. You're saying that you're not feeling well. Just because this is normal doesn't mean everything is okay. It just means that we've ruled out the emergent things that we can actually, and even just saying that to patients, I would just look at my patients' faces, how grateful they were. And I'm an ER doc, so I don't do clinic, but people would always ask, "Oh, can I see you in clinic?" I'm like, "Nah, man, I went to ER because I don't like clinic, but I wish that I could." There is now a growing body. So we have colleagues now going into integrative medicine or functional medicine. And I am so grateful for even docs like you, Santi, that have integrated so much of other modalities of medicine into our practice, because Western medicine is like a tiny little drop of water in a humongous ocean of what we can offer patients when it comes to their well-being and their health and their illnesses. And so the more and more physicians are open to looking to see what else is out there, what else is possible, the more we're going to be able to heal the world.
I fully agree. Fully agree. I will also admit that there was this part of myself that dragged my feet a little bit each time. I was like, there's something missing here. I really wish somebody would just hand it to me.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
And
a great point. No one's going to hand it to you.
no
Yeah,
one's
you got
going
to
to
go
hand
out
it
and
to
look
you.
for it. Yeah.
Yeah. I found 1.5 million reasons not to do something, ultimately to find it following me and following me and following me until
Mm.
I finally was like, I see you, puppy dog thought, like, I see you and let's do this. Let's do this.
Mm.
You are calling to me for some reason. So, as an example, like going back to the integrative medicine, I remember being a med student and watching explanatory videos on what the fellowship was about and how the curriculum looked and the community that was built around it. And I remember sitting one day in the med school library and just crying and being like, I want that. I want
Mm.
that. Why isn't that here for me? Like, why can't
Mm.
I have that? Do I have to really get more training? Like, I am tired and I'm exhausted. One day I want to get married, and one day I want to have kids, and I don't have time for more training. And, so that was what, gosh, like maybe 2006. And then I kind of, kept going along this very linear track. And then I went off to residency. In the first year of residency, I watched a similar sort of informational video. And once again, the tears. And I'm like, okay, all right, I know I can't ignore this anymore. Like, how are we going to do this? I
Yes.
graduated, got married, had my first kid, and then physically went through a lot of trials and tribulations. I had some health problems, and it just knocked me to my knees. It did. And finally, I was like, okay, now you are screaming at me. This must be the answer. Let's go. And that was kind of the segue into furthering my education in these areas and then the layers on top of it. And I'm sure I'm not the only one out there who procrastinates, who ignores the whispers. Has that been anything you've encountered in your history or with your clients?
Nah, I never procrastinate. Ha ha. Just kidding. Procrastination is so interesting. Okay, before we talk about procrastination, I just want to comment on what you mentioned about the voice following you. So, I call that voice like the whispers of the universe, right? It's like, hello, you're supposed to be doing something. Hello, tap, tap, tap. Why aren't you doing hello? For me, I matched into anesthesiology and totally like as soon as I like started, I was like, oh my God, like I knew something was off, but I was afraid to go back and re-enter into the match. And so I tried it. I tried them all my intern year. And I remember every time anesthesia would get called to the ER for an intubation, I would get so excited to go to the ER because I love the ER. So the universe is going to whisper, 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 whisper. And if you don't listen, what you will end up figuring out is that you feel restless or you feel unsettled or you feel unfulfilled. And it's because you didn't have the courage to listen to the whisper. And so I just honor for those of you that had the whisper, like Dr. Santi T here, for honoring the whisper and for following your heart, because the whisper is, call it whatever you want, intuition, heart, whatever, but it's the universe telling you, like, this is your path. So if you're finding yourself feeling unfulfilled or unsettled or restless right now, sit quietly and ask yourself, what am I not listening to? What am I supposed to be doing instead? Okay. Procrastination is interesting. So here's the thing about procrastination. Procrastination is never about avoiding a task. It is never about the task that we are avoiding. We make it out about like this task. It's never about that. Procrastination is a form of emotional avoidance. That's what it is. We are not avoiding the task. We are avoiding how that task we think is going to make us feel. That's a great example, what you said, Santi. Like instead of going back to do your training, you were so afraid of the time. You probably felt a feeling of dread, of fear. What about my kids? Am I going to be able to have a family? What about all this training and the money and all of these things?
Mhm.
What you were avoiding were all those fears. You were not avoiding the fellowship because you went back and it was all fine. You were avoiding what you thought it was going to make you feel. So, for all of you out there that have this problem of procrastination, when you notice what's coming up for you, ask yourself, what am I afraid that task is going to make me feel? Let me give you an example. What do I procrastinate on? Taxes pretty regularly. Why? Because taxes for me, I know I have to do them. Listen, I love paying my fair share of taxes because I think it's the right thing to do. And I hate paying taxes. I hate like going through and doing all my like doing all those things. It just feels dreadful. So what I am avoiding is a feeling of dread, which is why I procrastinate on taxes. And so here's a lot of the things that I've seen, especially really smart, high functioning leaders, what they, and probably a lot of people listening, they avoid things that they don't know how to start because they don't know how to start them. And so they procrastinate on starting at all because they're afraid. They avoid things that they think that they need to get done just right, that they need to be perfect on. And you avoid getting it out there. You avoid getting it out there. What are you avoiding? The fear that it's not perfect, the fear of judgment. So you're avoiding shame or judgment. What else do I see a lot of people avoid? Things that they don't know how to do, things that they need to get just right. These are like two big popular ones. Charting is a big one. Why? Because it feels dreadful to chart. Why does it feel dreadful to chart? Because we probably put it off so long. There's a ton of charts waiting for you. Or you think your charts need to look perfect because you want to make sure that whoever's reading them thinks you're really smart. And so then you take forever to get your charts done. And it's funny. I remember teaching one of my students this. And after just this one little thing, when I connected those two dots for her, she was writing a grant. She's like, oh, I don't know why I can't get this grant done. I've been trying for like a year and a half. And I was like, okay, well, what comes up for you when you sit down to do it? Oh, I need to get all this stuff done and I haven't done this research. And I was like, oh, sounds pretty dreadful. She's like, yeah, it's horrible. I'm like, huh. Yeah, I think what you're avoiding is that. I think you're avoiding the feeling of dread. And she's like, no, and so then I just sat with her and we just made a quick list and it turned out there wasn't a lot of stuff she had to get done. And we finished our coaching session. She emailed me that night. She's like, okay, 30 minutes after we were done with the coaching session, I started it. It's done. I submitted my grant proposal. I was like, yes, you did. Okay. Yes, you did.
So cool.
So again, procrastination is a form of emotional avoidance. We're going to run towards things that feel easy, that feel nice. And so the most important thing to know is when you are procrastinating, what is it that you do? Like some people, when they procrastinate, do things that makes them feel productive. So it's like, oh, I had to do all my emails or I had to clean my house. So that's why I didn't do it. Or you do things that don't create like a sort of a positive result in your life, like you overeat or you doom scroll or you do, you're like on Netflix all night. Those are also forms of procrastination, and they're both doing the same thing. You are avoiding the task. One of them, like for high functioning productive people, it makes you feel really good because you get those dopamine hits when you do those other things, but you are still avoiding the task. So just check in with yourself and ask yourself, like, how does this make me feel? How does this make me feel?
That's great. I've definitely noticed that little bit of perfectionism in me, like looking back at my middle school, high school, college, and so on, even with charting. When I look back at the time that I was in high school, those papers, the essays we used to have to write, I'd start them, one, two paragraphs, great ideas, great ideas, and then I just fall off. But always the night before the deadline, I would just stay up until the wee hours of the morning, finally finishing it and then handing it in the next day. I feel like that dread was worse than the dread that would have occurred if I just paced
Yes.
myself, right? It
Yes.
was just, please just move on. Like, what chances are like the end result would have been better if I allowed myself to pace myself rather than piecemealing it at the end when I'm very sleep deprived.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah,
Yes.
it's interesting. We see these patterns even in our childhood. So,
100%. 100%. Yeah, a lot of people call it a form of self-sabotage. Like procrastination is a form of self-sabotage. And I just think that's fascinating. I separate those two things in my mind. I don't think they're the same. Procrastination, again, we talked about, it's a form of emotional avoidance. And self-sabotage is fascinating because I actually don't think it's true. I don't think it exists. I think we label things self-sabotage, but really what's happening is we have protectors that are showing up to keep us safe. And they're not allowing us to do what our heart desires sometimes because we're afraid. There's these protector parts that are showing up to say, hold on a second, but if you speak on that stage, what if you like fall on your face and you get humiliated? And so you don't submit your proposal. So you procrastinate. You don't submit the speaking proposal. You don't submit the speak. Same thing. Like I want to leave my job and go do XYZ. But there's a protectors that show up like, what if we don't make enough money? What happens to our finances and our security? And so you just stay, and we call it self-sabotage. But what if it's just our protectors keeping us safe? And I know when I work with all of my clients, entrepreneurs and executives and leaders, even like some of my clients are these global leaders that are managing billion-dollar budgets and teams from all over the world. And they have the same exact trends that, everyone is a leader, but folks that are like department chairs or med directors or physicians or lawyers, it's same trends, same things. And when we can go in and identify which protector is here to keep you safe and heal that part of you, all of a sudden it unlocks a sense of psychological safety and you are able to do what it is that you wanted to do. You're able to submit proposals and go bigger and do really big, beautiful things in your life that you were not doing because you were afraid and you were calling it self-sabotage, but it's really just because we have these beautiful protectors that are part of us, that want to keep us safe. And it makes so much sense. So the more we can approach those protectors with love and with compassion and with understanding and allow ourselves to see them and accept whatever they're here to teach us and just show them that we're going to keep them safe, the better. I have this little picture of me. This is 3-year-old Vanessa. I keep it by my desk.
Oh, so cute.
If you're on audio, you can't see it, but it's this little picture. It's almost like black and white because it's so old from back in the day. And I just keep it right here. And when I sit at my desk, I'm like, what up, little Vanessa? You're so cute. I'm so proud of you. That's how I start my day because these little parts of us, they're going to be with us for the rest of our lives because, our hippocampus, which is what stores memories, doesn't fully develop till we're 3. And so whatever we experience until we're 3, we'll have no recollection of, but it'll stay in our body. And then after the age of 3, there's a ton of stuff we have no recollection of, but still stays in our body. Those parts of us stay in our body. So if some teacher one day told you something that made you feel like inadequate, that is probably still living in your body. And those are the things that we can like dig into and figure out. And a lot of what I do with my clients is tap into the subconscious, right? Because if it's clearly not in the conscious mind, or you would know about it, because most of what we experience is not in the conscious mind, because the conscious mind is like a tiny little like tip of the pyramid, right? It's most subconscious and autonomic. And so when we can tip into the subconscious mind and really uncover what are all these things, then we can unlock and we can witness and we can heal. And then we can allow all of everyone, like all my clients, to rise up and do what it is they want to do.
That's powerful. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think there's a book out there called The Body Keeps a Score.
Yes, I love
Yes.
that book. One of my
I haven't
favorites.
gotten
Yeah.
a chance to read it, but I've heard so many good things about it. And this sounds very similar to what you're speaking of, Vanessa, is how our bodies hold on to that memory
Mm-hmm.
of a negative event and how we then move on to protect ourselves from ever experiencing that pain again.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
100%. The Body Keeps the Score is one of my all-time favorite books. It's written by a trauma therapist with a ton of experience. It's so, so good. So I'm a big data nerd. I'm such a nerd when it comes to data, and he includes really compelling data. So it's a great book. However, what is not in the book is other trauma that we inherit. And so he talks about lived experience, lived trauma, which is very pertinent. But now we know from a ton of literature that we also inherit trauma. So generational trauma, ancestral trauma. And so sometimes you are born and you have no lived experience trauma, but you catch yourself always being anxious, always being nervous, or being afraid of specific things or specific archetypes. Like, I don't know why, but a person that looks XYZ kind of like makes me nervous. And then when we dig deep, it's like, oh, your grandmother had this issue with somebody who may have like abused her or whatever. And that is something you inherited because your ovum exists in your mother when your mother is an ovum in your grandmother. So there's many generations where you will inherit that trauma through something called epigenetics. And so it's so powerful. So it's really, really important to have such a holistic view when we are talking about these types of things because it's our lived experience, but it's also what we inherit, both as a collective, but also generationally.
that's amazing. Yeah, I fully agree. So this is something I talk about too, and I tell my daughter this. I'm like, you were actually in your grandmother's belly. And she's like, what? And I'm like, yes, because when I was in my mom's belly, you were already there. And how cool
Yeah.
is that? But that also means that anything that my mother went through funnels down,
Yep.
right? It funnels down, which is impactful to those of us who are mothers or are planning to be mothers, because there's the desire to want to have good information coming into our bodies, coming into our minds. That good will funnel down. That also means processing some of the hurt and being able to let go of it if that's something that's possible in this time period. Again, it speaks to leadership too, right? Parenthood is leadership.
Oh, 100%.
And the same thing in our career leadership roles. We carry our generational trauma or our personal trauma into those roles too. So let's say we don't want to be embarrassed. We're certainly not going to want our employees to embarrass themselves. So we may put this additional stress on them inadvertently. Sometimes it lands nicely and sometimes it doesn't land so well and can be offensive.
100%. I run a group coaching program for leaders, and what we've seen, only focusing on the leaders and their well-being, we don't include anything in the curriculum that has to do with team dynamics or going back and coaching your teams. This is only specific to the leader and their professional well-being and professional development. What we have seen is 95% of those leaders go back and their engagement scores with their teams improve based on just them. Why is that? It's exactly what you said, Santi, because the way you show up and the way you lead, it's energetic. So people are going to be able to pick up on that. And scientifically, we call it mirror neurons, right? That's how empathy works. But just one step above the physical, like energetically, if you are showing up and you're kind and you're open and you're receptive, all of us, like you've shifted that. You're no longer like stressed or afraid, or you need to show up a certain way. You need to prove something. Because most of us, when we're leading, if you're leading from a place of inadequacy, you're going to show up like you need to prove something. If you're leading from a place of insecurity, you're going to show up maybe a little arrogant because that's your protector showing up. And so that can be just a tone of voice. It can just be the way you answer a question. It can just be the tone of the email, those things get picked up on the other side by that person, and either energetically, so that means by their subconscious, or consciously, the way you say it. And so when you can shift those things and heal those things, it makes a tremendous impact. And same goes for our kids. You keep mentioning that parenting is leadership. 100%. The second that you have a kid, if you didn't think you were a leader, hello, surprise, you are a leader. But you don't have to have a kid to be a leader. When you are 8 years old and you decide to hold the door open for the person coming behind you, you are a leader.
Yeah.
And so I say that example because with my kids, we ask at dinner, how are you a leader today? And my son will say, yeah, I love that question. And they know it's coming. So guess what that means? That they're looking for ways to be a leader every day. And we know, and we teach them, leadership is not some big grand gesture. Leadership is picking up the trash when you see it on the ground and leaving somewhere better than you found it. Leadership is giving that ball to that kid because you've had it for long enough and it's time to share. Those are all ways that you can be a leader. So I guess what I'm saying is the more that you can heal those parts of you and show up from a place of authenticity and really true integrity and wholeness, the better leader you are going to be, the better you're going to make the world around you. Because when you heal your stuff, even if your child is already born, when you heal your stuff, you affect your children energetically around you, and then you affect their epigenetics, which means the way their genes are expressed will transform. It will mutate the way their genes are expressed in their lifetime so that when they give birth, they're giving birth to a healed generation.
So beautiful. I love this. I want to circle back for a moment to the protectors because you mentioned a couple of them there. Do you have specific names for particular protectors, like protectors that keep popping up in various people's lives? Like,
So the language of protectors for me comes from my study in internal family systems. So IFS, internal family systems, is a field of psychology. It's one tiny little branch of psychology. And I actually share this with my clients. And it's essentially the IFS model. And there's many different ways to look at the IFS model. So there's a way to look at it that's more culturally informed for people of color, I will say. And I've taken a class specifically on IFS in general. And then I worked with somebody that works with IFS, but through a culturally appropriate lens, and someone who's a woman of color. She has an amazing book. It's called The Pain We Carry. Her name is Natalie Gutierrez. She was my teacher first and now my friend, but she's just incredible. That book is amazing. There's two big schools of protectors. Okay. So there's the managers and then the firefighters. The managers are the protectors that show up when we're being really proactive. And so the most high functioning people have manager protectors. Managers are the people that show up like having to be in control all the time. You always want to be in control. You have to have your hand in everything. You need to know how things are going. That's a trauma for a lot of people. That might be a trauma response. Okay. So that's one. One of my clients is president and CEO of a large national medical group. And he was like, yeah, I don't know why I keep getting this feedback that I have to be in everything. I have to keep my hands in everything. I'm like, In my mind, I'm like, oh, yep, tell me more. I think I know what's going on here. And yeah, turned out that he was an immigrant, came from a very traumatic beginning and like fled a war-torn country in the Middle East. And when he got here, he lost parents and then had to be in control at a very early age. And so, of course, he developed that as a protector.
Yeah.
And so that's an example. So what other, like, people pleasing is a big common manager protector. Perfectionism, another one. So the ones that are more that we use that are more sort of accepted, these are managers. Okay. So people pleasing, perfectionism, procrastination, even because it's like the story of I don't have time. That's something that's very accepted in the school of the United States, like Western world, right? Like time is something we can all agree that no one has enough of. Overachieving can be a manager. Like I just feel so insufficient. I feel so inadequate. I have to do more and more and more and more. Okay, so those are managers. Firefighters are reactive. So firefighters are our protectors that are more reactive. These are the people that show up whenever we are doing things that just we feel embarrassed of after, even ashamed sometimes. We overreact, we yell, we scream, maybe we overspend, we overeat. We're binging on Netflix, at night. Those are firefighters. Firefighters show up as a more reactive type of protective. Managers are more proactive type of protectors. And what they are trying to protect in the school of IFS, internal family systems, are what we call the exiles. Exiles are the parts of us that feel vulnerable, that are afraid. And they're trying to protect those parts from being seen because we don't think it's safe for those parts to be seen. So in the school of IFS, we have the managers, the firefighters, the exiles, but then we also have what I call the highest self, our higher self, our core, our higher self. Our higher self is who shows up when we're well fed, when we're well slept, when we have appropriate hormones running through our body, not too much cortisol. When we're feeling psychologically safe, we can come from our higher self. And when we come from our higher self, we tap into our intuitive gifts, intuition, and we're able to make decisions that feel aligned with our values, feel aligned with integrity, and are coming from our highest and greatest good. And when you can come from your highest and greatest good, you are coming from the highest and greatest good of everyone because we are all interconnected. We are not separate. So when you can come from your highest and greatest good, you are lifting everybody up.
That is powerful. I was taking notes the whole time that you were talking about this because this is just, yeah, it explains so much about how we react to various things that happen in our worlds. I often tell kids sometimes our little brothers and sisters act like toddlers. Yeah. Well, yeah, because they are toddlers. Okay. Have you ever seen an older person, an adult, act like a toddler? And where do you think that's coming from? Like, what is it that puts them over into that level of response when we feel like we're lacking control, when we feel like we can't please anybody, when we feel less than and not perfect enough, when we feel like we lack the time, or when we're embarrassed? These things come into play, right? Like that negative sort of reaction. And I'm not saying that throwing a tantrum is the only way we react, right? But it's something that I think everybody has seen at some point or another, whether it's a child or an adult. I mean, that's perhaps an oversimplification of what you just said, but it really does. It explains so much. And wanting to protect those vulnerable pieces, those parts that
Yes.
don't want to be seen. And I can recall plenty of times where I felt like I wasn't good enough. And so I would try to like puff myself up and be like, well, this is why I think this way, only to feel like inside I was crumbling, right? Like we can put this facade up for only so long before things start to fall apart for us.
Yes. I remember my very first department chair job, my medical director department chair role. I was so young in my career and I was 1 year out of residency and I was excited to take on the job, but I felt so inadequate. I felt so insecure, so inadequate, like an imposter. But deep inside, I knew that I could do it, and people I was managing were like, so for those who have never met me, I'm a 5 foot tall, 100-pound Latina. So I'm like a light skinned brown girl. And and there were not a lot of women there were zero women on the medical staff when I took on this job. There were not a lot of women in my group in the emergency department, and there was only two other women. And everybody that was there, the person that had the job before me had been there for 40 years. And he was a 6'4", just typical looking white dude, like leader. And I had to manage them, including him. Oh my God. I remember how I showed up in the beginning. A few of my gifts, like I'm very disciplined. I'm always on time. I'm always prepared. But I would show up to my meetings. I would get there so early, make sure the room looked good. I had my PowerPoint and I was like, but I was showing up in a way that was almost arrogant. And I realized when I was like reflecting back, I was so afraid to be wrong. I was so afraid that somebody would be like, she doesn't know what she's talking about, that I would, one, over prepare, which is not a bad thing, but then I would respond to answers like if I knew all the answers. And that was not coming from a place of humility because I didn't have the psychological safety to be humble. I was so afraid that being humble wasn't enough. And it's fascinating when I go back and I look at that because in my evolution, I was a department chair medical director for almost like 10 years. And in my evolution, I remember towards the end and in many different facilities and in big hospital systems. And I remember at the end, I was at a meeting, and this is like a big medical staff meeting now with MedExec. And we were at a meeting and somebody asked a question and they're like, Dr. Calderon, what do you think about that? I'm like, that's so interesting. I have no idea. I don't know if I've even ever heard that word. What does that mean? Tell me what that word means. And then they're able to explain to me. But I was in such a place of full self-belief and self-trust and self-confidence that it didn't even and I felt so safe to be in my skin and to show up and speak up and be present. And it's such a different place. You come from, your ways of being reflect your level of safety. The more you can feel safe in your skin and trust yourself and feel safe in who you are, the more you're going to be able to show up fully authentic.
I love it. I can definitely relate to that. The version of who I was 10, 15 years ago, there are similarities, but there are certainly differences in how I approach things. Like, and this is just kind of a fun example. If my son is like, how do you not know what this is in Minecraft?
Yeah.
Like, can you explain it to me? Like, I don't know. I've never played this game. I'd like to learn. Can you teach me? Again, it helps bolster him. My response is one of humility. And now he gets the benefit of teaching someone else who doesn't know from a place of compassion, right? As opposed to, what do you think? I have time for this? I'm adulting here. I am busy, right?
Yeah.
Which totally, it takes away that equality, right? Now, automatically, we're creating a hierarchy and cutting ourselves off from what could have been a meaningful response in a place of connection and joy for myself and my child, right?
Oh, 100%.
We do this stuff all the time with our kids, and part of it is how we were brought up, right? Like I can remember times where my parents might have responded like that or chided me for asking a question, right? Do as I say, not as I do, like that sort of mentality, or giving me the answer of, well, that's just the way things are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not an explanation.
It's so interesting. I think one of the biggest illusions that we have been fed over the last, I'd say maybe 1500 to 2000 years is the illusion of hierarchy. I think it's an illusion that's holding back large institutions from really tapping into the natural intelligence of everybody that's there as a team. The entire sort of patriarchal ideology was the hierarchy that somebody knows better than you do, that somebody knows best. And there's a difference between wisdom and teachers and mentors versus someone who thinks that they know your truth better than you do, that someone that knows better than you do. I think that's one of the biggest illusions. So when you just said you come down to their level and you remove the hierarchy, that is so important. And I think the most effective leaders are leaders that see everybody as a peer. And of course, you have to set the vision. Of course, you have to be the strategy person, but you believe that you're not the smartest person in the room. When you can really tap in and say, somebody on my team might have a better idea. Let's get some discussion going. Let's see how everybody feels about this. One of the biggest skills that I've learned is when you show up to a meeting, you might have an idea of how you want the meeting to go, but don't start off with your agenda. Let the meeting evolve the way it's going to go. You be the person that facilitates the discussion, get people thinking, let people feel safe, sharing their ideas and questioning, and, let people be okay not agreeing with you. That's how organizations become the most innovative, the most successful, and the most profitable, when they can tap into everybody's innovations, everybody's ideas and creativity. And that comes from dissolving the illusion of hierarchy. The illusion of hierarchy holds organizations back. Oh my gosh. That's what's killing organizations. Organizations that are stuck with hierarchy, they are dying in terms of profits because that's just not the way the world is going to go anymore. That's the way it was, and people are trying to hold on to it, but that's not the way the world is going. People are going to want to feel seen. They're going to want to contribute, especially the current generation, people that we're raising up want to speak up. They want to be valued. And yes, of course, there's a place and time for teams and for leaders and for accountability. All those things matter. But dissolving the illusion of hierarchy is going to, wow, 10x organizations, 10x teams for sure, 10x families, 10x your life.
Yeah, I fully agree. Now, I know that there are probably folks out there that are like listening to this and saying to themselves, that sounds good and fine, but what about productivity goals?
What about what?
Productivity goals. Yeah, like meeting metrics. Yeah. So I'm sure you've come up against this as well. Like, well, I could be nice and humble and all these great things, compassionate and a good listener. But, what about this? What about the money?
Totally. Here's the absolute truth. It matters to be effective. We have to really rethink the word productive. And here's what I want to offer all of you out there. Being effective is 100% important. And how do we become effective? We get into our flow states. We do the things that really matter. That's how we become effective. We don't overwork. We don't work ourselves to the ground, and we don't base our worth on productivity. That is how we burn out. That is the opposite of what we want to do. That's the opposite of effective. Productivity, if you don't already know, was something that came out of the Industrial Revolution, cogs on a wheel, when people were really, their value really was based on how much they could produce in that factory, how many cogs they could produce that day. That's how they were paid. And listen, I come from farm workers. Like my families were farm workers. How did they get paid? How many barrels did they produce that day? Like that's how they were paid. And guess what? The people that are listening to this podcast, that is not the way it is anymore. There are still people out there where they're still getting paid per hour by what they're producing. And we need to disconnect that from their own self-worth, because a human being is not valued by what they are producing. Maybe that's what they're going to get paid, but a human being's value isn't about what they get paid at the end of the day. Just because like your child gets paid $0 a day, are they worth zero? No, of course not. Of course they're not worth zero, right? So we need to really disconnect productivity from self-worth. And when we can disconnect those two things, it creates so much inner peace for humans. And then you can start figuring out and linking, okay, so then what do I need to do to be effective today? What do I need to do to be effective? Because what ends up happening when we link everything towards productivity is then we think that we always need to be busy. Because we think when we're busy, we're getting stuff done. Oh, I got so much done today. I've coached people who's like, it's 10 hours and they're still trying to work. And they're like, I don't know why, what can I do to be more productive? I'm like, you can take a break. That's how you could be more productive. Like one of my clients, oh my God, she was one of the most high functioning people I have ever coached. She had like every system in place for everything at work, for her family, for like childcare, and what they were doing for summer camps. Like she had 2 young kids. She was one of the most highly like functional people I've ever coached. And she came to me because she's like, I just need to be more productive. And I was like, what are you not getting done? And we were like breaking down her systems. And I was like, no, productivity is not your problem, girlfriend. It's boundaries. Like you are doing way too much here and you feel like you're not doing enough. This is not a productivity problem. This is a boundaries problem and a self-trust problem. You're not trusting yourself here and you think you need to do more because you don't trust what you've already done and you're not creating boundaries. Anyway, when she was able to shift those two things, everything shifted in her life. I checked with her later and she was like, oh yeah, I'm playing tennis twice a week now. I eat lunch every day, where before she was like skipping meals, and she's like, and I'm so much calmer at home with my kids. I'm so much more present now. So productivity is such a funny word. It 100% matters. Listen, I'll tell you, even after I implemented all of these things in my own life, I was still one of the fastest ER docs. I was still one of the most quote unquote productive ER docs when you ranked us on scales. But like, does that matter? If I'm not being compassionate, if I'm not living in integrity, that's only going to last a certain amount of time. And then I'm going to burn out and I'm going to feel unfulfilled. I don't want that in my life. So really, it's a beautiful balance of be effective, be in integrity. Be effective and be in integrity. And I 100% promise you that if you are doing those two things in truth, like really being effective, really being in integrity, not hiding from actions, not procrastinating because you're afraid, like if you're really doing those two things, the money is going to follow 100%. It always has. I have seen organizations do this. I've seen leaders do this. I've seen humans do this when they're entrepreneurs. Money always follows when you are being in integrity and you are being effective. Being effective means got to take action. Sometimes that feels scary. That feel uncomfortable. You still have to do them, if you want to be effective, if you want to create, if you don't want like Santi's example of that little voice following you everywhere you go. It's like Frozen Part 2 when she was hearing that song, the siren song, up until the very end, she's like, fine, I'll follow you, song, and where did the song take her? To her truth. That's like the
Yeah.
universe telling us.
Oh, that song still makes me cry. Still. I feel like, yeah, every Disney movie has its thing that makes me cry. That's one of them, yeah. So, because it strikes that little bit of truth in me, right?
Yes.
Right? It strikes that little bit of emotion. One of the things that I was thinking too when you were talking about your client that is now playing tennis twice a week is the fact that we don't always celebrate our accomplishments either. So when we can't look back and actually take stock of what we have done, we aren't going to realize that we've actually done it. You know, it's almost like a celebration.
Yeah, there's a beautiful book. It's called Gap versus Gain by one of my favorite teachers, Dan Sullivan. And it's this concept 100%. I'm a runner. I was an athlete as a kid, and then an athlete becomes an adult, and I don't want to get injured. So anyway, I remember one day I was training for a half marathon, and I'm out on like an 8-mile run, and the horizon is in front of me. And it's, yeah, man, if you're a runner and you get a runner's high, and by like mile 3 or 4, it just feel like you're just on a high, and it felt so good. And I see this horizon in front of me, and I'm on the ocean. And I'm running towards the horizon. And guess where I'm never going to go? I'm never going to reach the horizon because it's the horizon. You never reach it. And I remember that concept of gap versus gain sink in so, like at that point, I was like, oh my God, that's it. If I was measuring my success by when am I going to get to the horizon, I'm going to exhaust myself. I'm never going to get there. But if I can stop and look back and be like, holy smokes, I just ran 7 or 12 miles. I just PR'd. I feel so healthy. I feel so good. That's the difference. That's gap versus gain. When you can really measure your success by what you have accomplished instead of measuring yourself with a gap mentality, a deficit mentality. What I have not done yet. I've not done this yet. I've not done that yet. That is only going to create insufficiency. Whenever you're trying to create from insufficiency, you're just going to create more insufficiency. It's like the dopamine analogy I gave earlier. You're never going to feel like enough if you're starting to create from a place of not being enough.
So powerful. Yeah, I fully agree. Fully agree. And I do think for those of us who are starting to see ourselves in that way, see ourselves as enough, it changes the way we approach our world and the way we approach the people around us, because now we are also able to view them as being enough.
Oh, that's huge. That's huge. Because if you're feeling like you're not enough, and that's how you're showing up in the world, how you're showing up in your marriage, how you're showing up at work, people pick up on that. And that's how they're going to see you too. And that's what they're going to think about themselves. Like, because maybe you're a leader and you feel insufficient. And so then you start nitpicking on everything under, like that your people are doing, because it's never going to be good enough. Oh, well, they're doing it. I should just do it myself. Your people you're leading are going to feel insufficient. If you do that with your kids, oh no, this is a funny example. God bless the fact that I was a working mom, because when our kids were first born, I remember my husband would dress my daughter and I'd be like, oh, you're going to put her in that, And so there was a little bit of like, oh, he's never going to choose the right. He's always thought he's never going to choose the right thing. But then I had to like go back to work, and he was like solo parenting because I was working a ton when my kids were really young. And what it created for us was like the perfect dynamic, because he fully stepped in. There wasn't me sitting there judging him all the time because I couldn't. I was always working. I just was like so grateful that he was around. But had I been there with my own like insecurities and insufficiencies of not being a good enough mom because I was working, that's what would have been fed into our marriage.
I agree. Yeah. I see where that dynamic occurs amongst new moms that come into the office with their husbands or their partners, and, and the partner's diapering the baby. And it cracks me up every time because I'm like, just let them diaper. If there's a little gap in the diaper and they get wet and your partner gets wet, the world will not come to a screeching halt.
Yeah.
We learn from it. We do better next time. We move on. But when we interrupt that process of learning for our partners and our loved ones with a holier than thou attitude, it increases that gap between the partners. And I find that a lot of times it's often the dad. They'll just step back. All right, you take care of it. And it's not always from a place of not wanting to help. It's because they don't want to engage in that sort of dynamic.
They don't want to be judged.
Yeah. So it's so important in all these areas of our life to be able to see everyone as whole and to see ourselves as whole, because we are. We are. Vanessa, this podcast was designed to help us to heal ourselves, our children, and our children's children. Do you have any last words of advice for our listeners?
Wow. The purpose of this podcast is incredible. Heal ourselves, our children, and our children's children. I will just say that is 100% possible. That when you heal yourself, just by healing yourself, don't focus on anything else or anybody else or healing your kids, just focus on healing yourself. I will 100% guarantee that you will heal the generations that come after you. 100%, just by you doing the work on yourself. I coach so many people that are like, how do I take this back to my team? Or how do I, this person or that person? I'm like, don't worry about those people, girlfriend, just focus on you. I guarantee you that when you focus on you, your ways of being bleed out into the world. Just focus on you, focus on you, focus on your growth, focus on your healing. And I 100% guarantee you are healing generations after you by doing that work for yourself. And you're healing the generations that came before you that didn't have the luxury to pause and to breathe and to heal themselves. So it's bi-directional. The most impactful thing I think a human being can do is heal those wounds that are sitting inside of them, because it helps them show up liberated, sovereign, from a place of true, authentic integrity. And then they're healing generations before and after. It's beautiful.
Beautiful. I have seen that in my work as well, right? Like when we heal ourselves, we heal the hurts of the previous generations, those generations that maybe didn't have as much as we do. And us being able to even just be grateful for what we have. It can really be that simple.
Yeah.
How can our listeners find you, Vanessa?
The easiest place to find me is on my podcast. If you like podcasts, you can find me on my podcast. It's called Purpose, Profit, and Healing. Purpose, Profit, Healing. Anywhere you listen to podcast. And I hang out on Instagram at Vanessa Calderón, MD. My last name is Calderon, Vanessa Calderón, MD. And that's my website also, vanessacalderonmd.com.
It was such a pleasure to have you on today. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. It was so fun. Thank you for inviting me.
Hey, if you like what you're hearing, give this podcast a 5-star rating and share it with your friends and family. If you want to learn more about my mom and what she does, visit her at iamwellmd.com and subscribe to her email list. If you leave her a comment, you might just get a shout out in her next podcast episode. If you like coaching or support, she has programs available for you and your whole family. My mom is a great pediatrician and a great person, and I hope you like her podcast episodes. Have a great day. Bye.